Cameras live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion. I might just give a few seconds as a few more people trickle in. So today's conversation is about building sustainable futures with a specific focus on 32 East Ugandan Arts Trust. It's a really exciting conversation about the work that's happening in Kampala. And we have Teesa, who is the director of 32 Degrees Arts, joining us direct from Uganda, and James Hampton, who is the architect and founder of a brilliant and exciting new architectural collective, the New Makers Bureau. So just before I introduce James and Teesa and they tell us about what they're doing, I would like to give you a little introduction to each of them, because I'm sure they're far too humble to do it for themselves. And a brief description of myself: I have a white background. I'm wearing a green linen t-shirt with a little nod to ecology, palm tree, and I am brown skin with short hair, and I'm wearing headphones. So my name is Bianca, as the host, as a curator and a writer. So just to start, as I mentioned, Teesa is a director of 32 Degrees East Ugandan Arts Trust, and she's impressively adept at being resourceful and embracing challenges, which I've also had the pleasure of seeing personally. When she was appointed the director of 32 Degrees East in her mid-20s, her determination and compassion really compensated for the fact that she didn't have an arts background. And she definitely acquired a lot of information along the way and has been recognized for that as well, including being listed on the Apollo Under 40s. From a position of unknowing and uncertainty, I think Teesa has really thrived and managed to maintain and build a respected reputation for 32 Degrees East as a center for creating and exploring contemporary Ugandan and East African art. One of the ways that she has been able to do this with her collective and her limited staff include reviving the Kla Art Festival, which is an international festival that takes the arts onto the streets, as well as creating international partnerships with global networks such as Arts Collaboratory and the Triangle Network. So from a space of being one of the few, if not the only existing arts hub, Teesa has really been able to create a network around her to support her that's both local and international. She has built the world around her in a context of constant uncertainty and is now into the next challenge, joined by James, to build the first purpose-built art center in Kampala, founded on sustainability and community. And James just shared a bit earlier that actually it's the first ever earth-rammed building in the city, which is brilliant to hear, actually, and very exciting to bring, the earth back into a city context. So we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about that. James Hampton is the principal director of New Makers Bureau, which was founded last year in May 2020 in the midst of lockdown, working from indoors at home in his kitchen, as he mentions. He's clearly doing well, responding to the chaos, and his practice is a collective of 3 architects motivated by the imaginative environmental architecture as a force for good, whilst also creating environmentally and socially conscious buildings. So James will tell us a bit more about that, but as an example, for those of you listening, his portfolio includes St. James Street in Walthamstow, which is an affordable workspace built in a disused car park in East London, as well as Little Hayden's in High Wycombe, which is again over hectares of land, a series of a new settlement to try and revive the local area that includes everything from a restaurant to an art center, and just trying to, again, really be respectful of the local ecosystem as well as people needing housing and spatial awareness. So both James and Teesa are dedicated to creating a space built from the materials directly on site. This new art center has been designed in conversation with the artists and the community it will serve. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about those artists and their comments, as well as James and Tessa's experiences to get to this point. And this conversation actually comes, you know, at a point of considerable transformation for both James and Tessa, but also for all of us. We're all facing this at the moment in our lives, from their macro experiences to from their micro experiences to the macro. We're being challenged at the moment with environmental issues, the pandemic, as well as you know, there are so many uncertainties. So with that in mind for all of us, and whilst it might feel very daunting, I think it's a really good opportunity to take stock and reflect. And for everyone who's joining us, the question for you to keep in mind is, how can uncertainty be used as motivation for innovation? So over to Tessa, who will introduce us to 32 Degrees East, and we'll play some videos of the space before James gives us a bit more of the context. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bianca. You're totally right. I would never have said all those amazing things that you just did. But really lovely introduction. So glad to be here. Thank you so much to the team at Invisible Dust, particularly Ed for this invitation, and really excited to share our project with you. So as Bianca shared, I am here representing 32 Degrees East, Ugandan Arts Trust. We are a non-profit space located in Kampala, Uganda, which is the capital city of this. Behind me, I am wearing a maroon shirt today that matches with my earphones, so kind of not coordinated, but you know, gets me Zoom ready. So, but yeah, really thrilled to be here. Again, we are a center for contemporary art in a context that is not that welcoming to contemporary art. We don't have a Ministry of Culture in Uganda. We don't really have national galleries. There's a national museum, but it's you'd have to see it for yourself to really see how it doesn't fully meet the needs of artists. I think, as in many different contexts around the world, art is really undervalued here, and to be a practicing artist is difficult, but it's also incredibly brave, and it's something that we think, you know, needs to be valued more. Artists should be given the kinds of resources needed to dream more, to reflect, to help us to critically think, and I think most importantly to radically imagine new ways of being and doing, and all these things that artists are able to do in every kind of context, in every time. And so we as a space are really here to be a home for those artists, to bring them into community with each other, so that they also know, one, that they're not alone, two, that, you know, they are in community with potential collaborators, and a supportive structure. You know, people are really the best resource. And so we also try to serve as a way to connect artists to each other. And then also to introduce new audiences to contemporary art, because we, again, lack a lot of that kind of infrastructure here in Kampala and Uganda. It's really important, I think, to have spaces that are accessible and that, you know, showcase contemporary art to everyone, you know, so that it's not and be encouraged and excluded because of that. So we try to do all of those things, and essentially do that through our residency program, which is on hold, which I'll tell you a bit about later. We also have this resource center that I'm in right now, which also gives artists access to internet. We have a Mac with Adobe Creative Suite, and then we also have public programming as well, like Kla Art, that Bianca mentioned. So maybe talk a bit more about the video and what we're seeing in these images as they play. Oh, so I think maybe Bianca, if you could play the longer video of the new space, and then we'll move to those videos. There's a little preview just to get everyone excited. So this is actually our new location. Showcase a little bit about, you get to also see the before and after. So we moved to this new plot, which we purchased thanks to a grant from the African Arts Trust and Arts Collaboratory. And at our old space, which we'd been at since 2011, we had been using these shipping containers. And so we were able to bring them to our new space. So that's the container that we repurposed as a library. That's where I am right now. And then we had these other two containers that we were using as studio space for the artists. And as you see, like they've worked really well. They're, I think, about 8 feet, James could correct me, but would work as workspace for the artists. But right now we're kind of using them as flexi space as we transition. So when we purchased the plot, there were actually 2 buildings on site, which has actually been quite a great find actually for the part of town that we're in. So what we plan to do with these 2 buildings is we're actually going to break them down and use them in the building that emerges. So really, again, a way of thinking carefully about, our carbon footprint and reusing materials that are on site. But in the meantime, we're like, let's have fun with them. And we just invited artists to play around and do their thing, knowing that, there's no pressure, they can do what they need to. So this is one of the main houses on site that will come down later. But in the meantime, we've been using it as office space and also as a kitchen that you'll see in a little bit, little coffee area. But again, so just to contextualize this space a little bit more, it's 5 minutes away from our previous location, which was really big. So I think, one thing to know about property here is it's not cheap. I mean, as everywhere, but to find a plot of land in the city that was not far away from where we were, that already has buildings that we could move in immediately and save money on rent, was just really, I think, such an amazing find for us. And I think we're really lucky. And also for anyone who's actually been to Kampala, we're located in Kabalagala, which is kind of known. Some people call it the Vegas of Kampala. So imagine like a lot of nightlife, and it's just very buzzing. It's just a very, very exciting area, but we're amidst nature. There are all these trees, there are avocado trees, there's a soursop tree, there's a lemon tree over there, there are more avocados in the background, constantly hearing birds chirping. So it's, I think, just again, so we were really lucky to be able to find it. It's not a large space, but I think, as James will show you, you can do a lot with space if you think really considerably about how you want to use it and what you need. And again, also in terms of its location, it's right down the road from a university as well that doesn't have an arts program. So again, it's kind of a nice way to also start to introduce different people to contemporary art. And yeah, I talked so much about this, but I haven't even said what's going to happen. So I guess I'll kind of leave that to James as to where things will go on the site. But it's kind of a nice little before image to show you how our current setup is before the magic happens. But where this image ends is where phase 1 of the construction will take place. So those seats are where the cafe will be. But yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that. So that's the context. That's where we are right now. And then the next 2 videos are well, maybe, I don't know, should we do those after James's presentation? Maybe it's a bit better so that he can contextualize what's happening. So maybe, yeah, I think I'll end there and then hand over to James.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Teesa. I'm James. I'm wearing a blue shirt. I'm a white man with dark hair and some big black glasses. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about the design of the project. I'm going to try and share my slideshow, and it's a sort of this should work now. I'm just going to share. Yeah. So I just collected a sort of number of different images from the project. So I thought I'd just try and give you a kind of feel for the project rather than sort of talk about it in in all the kind of technical detail of everything, but to give you a feel. So the site, you know, as Tess said, it sits behind the Gabba Road, which is really busy, and it's kind of quite a quiet, secluded plot. And it's on a sloping site, so there's a kind of gentle incline of a couple of meters as you approach the site. It kind of falls away from you by a couple of meters. There are these existing features, there are the buildings, and there are these trees, and we really try to keep everything on the site. This avocado tree in the foreground is sadly going to have to be removed because it has a disease, but all the other trees will be kept on the site. And we're going to reuse parts of the existing buildings as well, as Tessa said. So the roof tiles will be reused, the old bricks will be used and filled into the ground. Even the corrugated roof sheets will be incorporated into the new building. And the intention is that the building is of the site. It's literally of the ground. The walls are made from rammed earth, which sit on a plinth of local stone. And then above that, there are earth bricks as well. They're made by a special machine, which Tessa's going to show you a video for in a minute, a special press which compresses the earth bricks, and they're unique to our project. So we've made these blocks, and the dimensions are unique to our project. But all the earth will come from the site. You know, the first step is that you remove the topsoil, and then you have to excavate the site to get the raw material for the building. And you add a bit of cement into the earth, but you know, not too much. It sort of depends what the earth's made of. And it kind of stabilizes the earth. And we've inserted these tiles into the rammed earth, which throw the water away from the earth wall. And then we have these big overhanging roofs, which kind of do the same, because when it rains in Kampala, it's really, really heavy rain. And the building itself is arranged around this central courtyard, which is also a really lush garden. So you enter into the courtyard, and then you can access all of the other spaces of the building from this courtyard. The gallery is to your left, and the cafe is to your right, and the artist studios run along one side. These are the artist studios. And the gallery space opens onto another type of courtyard. There's a walled garden, which is an extension of the gallery space, which has a kind of harder landscape surface, and these walls around it, so you can exhibit artwork in the open air. And this stone datum runs around the edge of the building, kind of reminding you that you're on a slope. And then in the rammed earth walls, there's these big holes which are punctuated with these openings you can see in the image. Sometimes really big, sometimes small, depending on how public the space is internally. So big openings connect to the street, and the smaller ones are for privacy to the artist studios. And we've tried to kind of be inspired by the city, by Kampala, to make the details of the building. So we're using these corrugated concrete lintels, where we take the corrugation of the roofs and then we cast concrete against it. So you have this kind of red textured corrugated concrete which sit above the walls, sit above the windows and the doors. And there's this tile band which runs along the top of the rammed earth, separating the materials. And benches are created to make kind of social spaces, again out of rammed earth, sometimes facing into the artist studios and sometimes facing into the garden. And there's these big sliding doors which separate the artist studios from the garden, which means the artists can kind of choose how private they are. They can close them and shut themselves in, or they can open them and be connected to the courtyard. And then finally, the roof is made from timber tiles, which are constructed from the formwork that we use to make the rammed earth walls. So there's this whole cycle of materials being reused in the building as well. Thanks.
Thank you, James. I think there's going to be a lot of questions. And just to remind everyone that there will be a section, there is a Q&A section, so please put your questions in the chat area below. Just before I ask a few questions, I do want to play the two videos that were mentioned, hinted to earlier, one of which shows the process of rammed earth. If either James or Tessa would like to comment on them, they're very brief videos before we go into some questions that these two, you sharing information kind of led to?
Sure. So this is actually an experiment taking place with Local Works, who are our local partners here in Kampala. So they will be, they both helped with the technical drawings and architecture on the project, and then will also be the contractors on the project. So these are compressed earth blocks being made in the machine that's been purchased for this project.
Why do you press the corners?
Well, they're more vulnerable, so you need to theoretically stabilize them.
Okay. So you have maybe a little bit more on there.
This one you feel it.
How much do you weigh? Do you mind me asking? Yeah. Wow.
When I feel the next person will do it.
Oh my God. Guys, it's not easy. It's traveling. Can you put in too much? Because I'm like, the thing is going to fall. This is so cool.
Bianca, maybe on the next video you can just skip towards the end. I just wanted to show everyone what the block looks like once it comes out. I also love just how fun it is.
Yeah.
It's clearly like a playground.
That's it.
Like, is this one thin now?
This is the right size, basically. But
Right.
the compaction is not enough. Because,
Hmm.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that. Well, I think just to start off with, especially after just playing those two videos, one of the questions to ask you is actually, because this has been created in consultation with the artists and the local community, could you tell us a bit about the process of how you arrived at this point and how you came to collaborate with each other?
Yeah. Teesa, do you want to go?
Okay, I'll start off and hand
Please
over. Yeah, well, it's been a long process, long journey in the making. So I actually joined 32 Degrees East in 2016, but it was founded in 2011 by Rocca and Nikki. And Rocca is actually really good friends with James's partner. And so that's actually, I think they had initially started talking about the prospect of working together at some point. And when Rocca handed over, she was really intentional about thinking about the longevity of the organization. I think having been around for 5 years up until that point, and just kind of really seeing that, you know, it's actually, it's legitimated by the community and really valued by a lot of the artists who work here. And so, you know, we could just let it die or really think about the future and what it means to go on and think about our financial resilience and sustainability. And a big part of that is actually owning your own plot. And so once we put, you know, she did a lot to help us be in a position to purchase the land. And then it became, how do we think about what we want to do with it? We could have just moved the containers, which was the initial idea, but then we again thought this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to really think about creating a space that is built with the artists in mind from the beginning, and really speaks to what it is that they would like to see ideally in a center. And then with that as well, thinking about what that means in terms of the environmental sustainability too. So James, do you want to speak on that too?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my involvement was, I think Rocker asked me, it was just when Teesa was joining, and this was many years ago now, Rocker asked me to look at moving some containers, I think, from one site to the other. And then it kind of snowballed into this bigger idea. And I think, yeah, it's important to, Teesa mentioned this sort of idea of economic sustainability. That's not just, there's obviously environmental sustainability, but there's a sort of social aspect to it as well. That the building will give 32 the ability, and the land will give them the ability to flourish for like years and years to come. Yeah, and I think, in terms of the sort of collaboration, why we're working together, there's that sort of personal connection, but I think much more than that, like for my practice, this is kind of like the dream project. This is like the project you would wait your life for, in a way, like to make an art centre that's, it's not quite net zero, but it's like very, very low carbon embodied energy. This is like the projects that I want to do as an architect. Yeah.
Thank you both. My next question is actually also prompted by a comment from Harriet Fowler, who's asking, aren't your rammed earth bricks the same as stabilized soil bricks that have been used in a lot of projects?
Yeah, yes, they are, is a short answer. I think the comment about it's the first rammed earth building. So the rammed earth walls are the thing that's new to Kampala. And that's sort of found out from our local architect, who's kind of really excited, he's built some rammed earth projects before in Uganda, notably the one, the Renzo Piano Hospital, which I think is in Entebbe or just outside of Entebbe, which is a huge rammed earth project, but there's no rammed earth projects in Kampala itself. So that's why he was really excited by that, actually, because I think there's an idea that sort of earth and rammed earth and these sort of technologies don't necessarily belong in kind of urban contexts, and we're kind of bringing that right into the city. So there's a sort of example of how you might use rammed earth in an urban context.
So yeah, just to say, it's a mix. So there's some aspects of the building that are rammed earth, which is a different process than what we showed in the video, which is the stabilized earth block.
Thank you, Teesa. Now I want to ask a few questions about the community. The first one is about, how did you arrive to the design in consultation with the artists that who've been very loyal to 32 Degrees East and always mention even when they move on in their careers? How are they included in this designing, even though you've been in conversation for about 5 years to get to this point anyway?
Shall I start? I think the first time I went to visit 32 was in 2016. And there was kind of a slight suspicion of me, actually, I think, kind of, literally flying in, like this architect flying in, and, presented sort of initial ideas to the kind of artist community. And I remember having this quite kind of heated debates, not just about the actual project, but about kind of the role of them and the role of us. But it was kind of done with real kind of openness, actually, real genuine openness, and kind of, it was very engaging, and it's kind of been like that ever since. Obviously I can't be in Uganda all the time. That would really sort of waste all of the carbon that we're saving in the project if I was flying back every week. Be nice though. But I think through Teesa as well, as the work's been adapted and changed, it's kind of always been going through the filter of the artists and the local community. And then, each time, I've been a few times now to Kampala, each time I go, I'll meet with the artists and we'll discuss the project. And that's obviously like so important it's so important to any building really, but it's feels like it's so important to this building, because this, part of the role of this building, it's not just a building, but it's kind of this safe space in a way. It's this kind of secure space where, as Teesa was saying in her introduction, there's not this kind of it's not necessarily welcoming, but there's not the same kind of relationship between contemporary artists, and the rest of society as there are, in the UK. So I think there's something about the building which is kind of nurturing. It's like protecting, nurturing the artists, and I think it's so important that they feel like it's their building, because it's not my building. It's not actually Teesa's building, really. It's the artist's building.
Thanks, James. And still on the conversation of community, so from consultation to creation, we saw in the video that the rammed earth bricks, actually the machine does a lot of the work, and the rest of it is about pressure and force. So in terms of the labor, how much, or is there any involvement with the community or even some of the artists that have used the space to try and mobilize them? Is there any of that? Has any of that been considered?
We've talked about it a little bit. It's still very early stages. So we are hoping to begin construction in April. But one of the reasons why we're also excited about working with Local Works is because their approach is also very much about sharing knowledge. So really, thinking about sustainable architecture in Uganda and in Kampala specifically, in a way that kind of introduces new people to alternative ways of building. And so we really talked about, how can we make it an open process? Will we have particular, days of the month where different people can come in and learn from what's happening? The fact that we're actually on the site right now also allows for a really interesting way of experiencing the project. The labor, yesterday I went on one of those machines and my arm still hurt today and it didn't budge like a centimeter. So they are very strong people who are working on those machines, but it's also just a fun way to get people involved. So we're definitely thinking through how it can be this interactive experience where people literally get their hands on.
Thank you, Teesa. The title of this talk is about building sustainable futures. So I guess I want to talk about something you both hinted at, which is, first of all, you're creating a blueprint for something that doesn't already exist, for a community that already is seen as kind of marginal and not understood. What continues to motivate you when there isn't an example necessarily? You're making, in the way that Invisible Dust does, the invisible visible. What motivates you to keep going if you're not necessarily having support in a local context, even if it might be international? How do you manage to create some sense of motivation when there's so much uncertainty about what you're doing from a cultural perspective even, and then to now be expanding on top of that?
I think that's the motivation. What a way to, I get to come to work every day and know why I'm coming and feel like I am contributing to society and in a way that other people aren't. Like, what a gift. To me, that's just so special. And to be able to, really introduce the kinds of change that we want to see in the world in a very literal, physical way, and to do it in a way that can be a model for other people who also aren't in the same physical space. Like, that's amazing. I think it's just, it's really incredible. Like, who doesn't want, especially right now, who doesn't want to feel like there's community that they can go to, that there's infrastructure that supports them, that there are resources that support them, that what they do is valued even without an economic, number on them. Because also I think an important thing that we do that I didn't really talk about is in the studios, we really encourage experimentation and really thinking about and trying to move away from have to produce, you have to sell. And what does it look like to just give artists the space to just create and fail and experiment and all those things. And for artists to do that, but for other people to also be inspired by artists doing that. Even talking to Local Works, they were like, can we do a residency? Like, we need that too. Like, I think every space, like that kind of mindset and philosophy of really, getting to question things and to try new things and to say that, yeah, this deserves resources and should be invested in, is so motivating for me, and I think for everyone that we work with here too.
Yeah, I think I can just second that, because that's one of the things that motivates me is like 32 as an organization. There's such a, you go to their space and you just feel the kind of energy, and they're just doing such brilliant work, and it's just, and all of the artists as well that I've met, there's so much kind of energy, and yeah, so that's what kind of drives me to do it. I think it's actually being inspired by 32.
Thank you. Just to tell all of the participants that we'll be opening it up to your questions in about 10 minutes. So if you want to think of any prompts or start thinking of questions to phrase for the Q&A, we'll also have 3 polls, which we'll be asking in 5 minutes with yes or no answers. So we'll get to that. Just to go from talking about inspiration, this is a directed question for you, James. One of the things that reappears in your work is this idea of having a focal point, a courtyard, a point where everyone gathers, which again, you've replicated with 32 Degrees East. Can you talk about that and how it's a format that you're able to transfer wherever the context is, whether you're working in Europe or in Uganda?
Yeah, I think it's quite a well used architectural device, kind of central courtyard, and then things come off of it, kind of historically. Lots of types, monastic typologies of architecture would have a kind of courtyard, and then spaces would come around. For me personally, it's about a kind of social space. It's like this. It's a silly kind of metaphor, but the heart of the building in a way. And it's also, it kind of works as an orientation device as well. It's very simple. You come in and you can kind of see everywhere. You kind of know exactly where you're going to go. And I think in the case of what kind of makes it specific in the Kampala context is it's quite a kind of compact courtyard because of the size of the space. It's quite compact, which makes it really shaded as well. So in kind of European spaces you might make them a bit bigger or whatever, but in this one it's quite a small courtyard. It's quite long, so we kind of split its character into these different kind of more public character at the sort of entrance side, and then it's more private as you get to the other end. It kind of becomes more kind of lush and green as well. But yeah, it's a kind of social device, really. I think you're kind of helping people to interact, and it creates it kind of creates that cohesion, hopefully, in kind of the way people use the building.
Thank you, James. Teesa, this question is for you, because one of the things about your journey is there's been prolonged uncertainty, whether it's funding related or the space or, in so many ways, what's the vision? Because you've had to endure and actually become quite adept at responding quickly to uncertainty, have you been impacted by the pandemic with your work with 32 Degrees East?
A little bit. I think we've been quite fortunate. I think if you, also just thinking about other partners, some who, have had to go under due to funding. We were supposed to have a public arts festival last year, obviously could not, so hopefully that will happen this year. And then I had also planned to do quite a bit of fundraising in terms of traveling to places this past year. So I think that also kind of affected things quite a bit. But we've been really fortunate, I think, with different funding partners, and really nice to see Oba on the call as well. I think, it's just been, the timing's worked out. We've been really fortunate, I just say. I mean, it's been a quieter period. And so even moving to a new site and kind of having these half operations, we've been able to do that with COVID. And then also just rethinking how we work with the artists during this time as well. So are there things around, thinking through emergency funding and aspects like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been not so easy, but we're okay, and we have, at least, I think it's really we're grateful to have something so exciting to be working towards that really feels like it's still very relevant and very pressing and very urgent, particularly being in these times.
Okay, thanks, Teesa. We're just going to ask the first poll question because of time as well, which links to a contribution from the audience. The first poll question is about uncertainty, so that's going to come up soon. And whilst we're waiting for people to answer, I'll quickly ask you a question, which is, in terms of embracing the failures, you mentioned embracing failures for artists. What kind of failures have you had to face with this project, which you've just mentioned anyway, but maybe if you could expand a bit more on that as well.
Yeah, well, I think so all the stuff you don't see when we present this project is the 4 or 5 years of development. You know, we've had a whole different design on a different site that didn't happen, you know, that failed, radically failed. Lots of reasons. We've had sort of funding bids that didn't happen, and then that would kind of be really depressing and like, oh no, we're not going to be able to do it. You know, there's so much failure within the project in a way. You know, it's kind of all the learning of those things. You know, the site before, we kind of learned from all the work we did. You know, it wasn't kind of ditched. Kind of learned from all those failures in a way. And I think, you know, it's important to remember this project's not even on site yet. So that's when, you know, the really starts. Don't get scared, Teesa. But you know, there's often a couple of failures that happen on site that you have to kind of think quickly to resolve. You know, so there's more to come.
We built our failure muscles, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We've got our answers in about does uncertainty allow for innovation, and we have a resounding yes. So I think that's a really good and positive takeaway for us at the moment, whilst we're all facing this uncertainty of to persevere, because something will definitely come from it. Whilst we go to our second, and actually we'll make it our last poll question for today, I would also like to ask very quickly about you mentioned about accommodating the local ecology. Could you talk about, for example, you said the almond, the avocado tree has a disease, so you'll have to take it down. So could you talk about some of the other concessions that have had to be made? Just before you answer this last question, I will repeat the poll question or mention the poll question, which is, are there any materials in your context, so this is for our participants, that can be used like rammed earth? So if you have any suggestions or you could think about, please share and mark your answers now for the poll. Meanwhile, James and Teesa, are there any other concessions you've had to make for the local ecology for this project?
James, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think the main one is that tree. We were quite sad, or I was quite sad to see it leave, actually, to see it go. The guys from Local Works, because they have to build it.
We were sad too, but yeah. Everyone was like, everything grows here like crazy, so.
yeah. But the guys who are going to build it were quite pleased because it wasn't going to interfere with the foundations for the building, you know. So I think there's that concession. I think there's, it's difficult, you know, if you go to the site today, and Teesa will sort of tell you this, it's like you can hear the birds singing, it's so kind of vibrant, there's so much wildlife. And of course, making a building is not a kind of clean process. It's going to be messy and noisy for a good sort of 6 to 9 months at least. And that might kind of create, you know, some wildlife might have to disappear and then it'll come back, you know. So I think that's something you have to kind of balance with making a building. I hope that by the end of the project, once the garden is planted and is kind of mature, then there'll be more trees and more kind of habitats for wildlife. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Teesa, do you have any comments for our last question before I summarize?
Just thank you so much for this time and this opportunity to share. It's been really fun. And hopefully people will stay tuned. We're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign in a few weeks. So I think that's also, I think, an important aspect for us, just in thinking through a project like this. Often the funding will come from like 1 or 2 people or, you know, a few foundations, but it's a really nice way to also think about having community involved in everything. So we're really looking forward to that. And hopefully you'll stay tuned for the whole process. We also look forward to documenting a lot of it and producing things that we can share. So please, yeah, sign up for newsletters, subscribe to things, all of the works. We'd love to keep sharing this with you. And thank you again to Invisible Dust. And to you, Bianca.
Thank you very much, Tessa, and thank you, James. We would like to thank you all for joining today's forecast program. And remember that the question is, what is shaping how you think about the planet's future? There are more events lined up for today up until the 7th of March, and tickets are available for free or for a suggested donation to Invisible Dust. As some of you already know, that Invisible Dust works with leading artists and scientists to produce unique and exciting works of contemporary art and scientific ideas, as well as having conversations like this. We'd also like to say a massive thank you to Alice Sharp, Ed and Lydia, who facilitated today's talk. And if there are any more questions, for example, Harriet has sent in a last minute question, please get in touch with 32 Degrees East and also with New Makers Bureau to have those questions answered. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And we hope that you'll be reminded that uncertainty breeds innovation. So we hope you find that innovation and whatever guides for you in your context, wherever you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.